everyone. Welcome to our series called Simply Multifamily. My name is Kieran Dillon, and I am a broker associate at KW Commercial specializing in multifamily sales. I work with buyers and sellers of apartment and multifamily properties all throughout the greater Los Angeles and Inland Empire areas. The purpose of this series is to highlight issues and introduce strategies that affect and benefit owners of multifamily properties via market updates, investment insights, and interviews with trusted professionals. Today, we're going to be speaking with Joel Dobrin, Director of Business Development and Project Management at Cost Segregation Initiatives, LLC. Welcome, Joel. It's great to have you.
Karen, the pleasure and honor is mine. I'm happy to join you here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into your line of work.
So briefly, a little bit of my background. I'm originally from the great state of New Jersey. I was a basketball player, came out, played college basketball at UCSB. When I first got out of school, I got involved in the physical therapy equipment finance business and still have a little bit of dabbling in that. Hit fast forward 30 plus years, and about 15 years ago, it was just very serendipitous that I got introduced to a CPA and a construction expert through another contact who specialized in this area of cost segregation. And the gentleman that introduced me said, Joel, you're working with medical professionals. Some of them have to own their buildings. You should look into this. And I did just that, and it has become just a fabulous business to be part of. Just really interesting, and as we'll talk about, the benefits are fabulous. I'm married for 30 years to my wonderful wife, Lori, and got two beautiful daughters, Jenna, 27, and Rachel, 25.
That's great. So tell us about cost segregation. What exactly is it, and how does it work?
So I still refer to cost segregation really as a hidden gem of the tax code. And I spend just a large part of my time really sharing this information and looking to educate people about how truly beneficial it can be. It allows owners of both commercial and in your focus, residential rental and multifamily apartment type of properties to accelerate depreciation. And by accelerating depreciation, it allows the owner to offset their current income and reduce their current income tax. And the way that we do that for a multifamily property is standard depreciation is set up over 27 and a half years. What cost segregation allows us to do is to go in and study that building and reclassify much of that property into shorter life periods of 5 years and 15 years. And at a very high level, the 5-year property consists of primarily interior elements, which in an apartment building would be things like carpeting, cabinetry, wood flooring potentially, some of the fixtures, some of the electrical, the security systems, IT, possibly window treatments. The exterior, the 15-year property, is everything outside: landscaping, irrigation, sidewalks, curbing, striping, fences, gate enclosures for garbage areas. Those make up the 15-year elements. So if you just think about conceptually, owners have an opportunity rather than to wait and get small bits of benefit over 27 and a half years, we condense that. And we take the building and we move it into 5-year components and 15-year components, and they're able to receive that benefit much faster. And as we move further along, we'll speak about how it's even been further enhanced, but that's kind of the teaser for a little later as we move down the path here.
Got it. So what type of properties does cost segregation work best with? And are there any types of properties that there wouldn't really be a benefit to exploring cost segregation for?
So one of the things that really attracted me and I found fascinating about this early on is the market is huge because it's applicable to all types of property, all types of commercial property, and also all types of residential rental. And whether that be apartment buildings, whether that be duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, We've even done single family homes that people have bought for investment purposes. The key being is that it is not their primary residence. If it is not their primary residence, it's worth exploring to see what the benefits might be. Anybody that is making money and paying tax might want to take a look at this. We have yet to meet anyone in 15 years that wants to overpay their taxes. That winning streak is still intact.
Yeah.
So areas where it would not make sense is if somebody is not making money and is not paying tax, number one, or if they have a property with a building basis that is less than $700,000. Because when someone purchases a property, of course, and stating the obvious here, they have both land and building. And cost segregation is solely focused on the building portion because the land is not depreciable. So we want to make sure that there's enough building structure there for it to make sense to explore.
Got it. And maybe this kind of touches on what you just mentioned, but do these properties need to be within a certain price range to benefit from cost segregation?
There's maybe I'll answer that two parts to it. Number one would be yes. If there's not at least I would say $700,000 of building basis, then we wouldn't suggest it would be done. We just don't believe that there's enough benefit to be generated where it pencils. Now, I will say there may be some folks in our industry that may say, oh, they would do it and it makes sense, but we focus on quality and standards. And I think one of the other things that sets us apart is my partners are two of less than 45 individuals nationwide that are certified by the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals. We are not interested in just collecting fees. We only want to pursue properties where we truly believe it makes sense. And we think that's a good benchmark, excuse me, and a good threshold. The other thing too is people think that this is just applicable for new purchases, and it surely is there. But one of the things that is not as widely recognized excuse me, is the fact that we can take a look at previously purchased properties. And our general suggestion is anybody that's owned a property for 7 years or less, it's worth exploring cost seg on because the rules will allow us to go back to the original date of purchase and put in place cost segregation. And then in a one-time catch-up, the owner is able to take advantage of those benefits. It's called a look-back study, and it also serves to be very, very beneficial.
Okay. And so that kind of leads into my next question, which is on this end, we can still utilize cost segregation even if you've owned the property up to 7 years. What about on the front end? Is it a good idea when buyers are looking to purchase a property to start thinking about cost segregation even before, maybe while they're in escrow? Or is it something you want to look at after you actually have purchased the property?
Karen, it's a great question. And I think for savvy owners, savvy business people that look at the totality of what does this acquisition mean, it's not only just the purchase, it's what is available to them once they close. And so if you have clients or your folks have people within your sphere, so to speak, that are looking at a property, and if they want to get an idea of, well, if I purchase that property, what would cost segregation do? How would that play a role? Then what we can do is we can put together a snapshot that would illustrate what their benefits would be. And I think maybe just a simple way of saying it would just simply be imagine that for people that close on a property and cost segregate it shortly thereafter, it's almost like you get a cash rebate from Uncle Sam. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I do like this idea of when you're looking at a property, reach out to Joel and have you do an evaluation because that can certainly factor into whether this is going to be a good purchase for you or not down the road.
Exactly right.
Okay.
I think maybe again, because it's an important piece to the puzzle. Oftentimes, people are looking at the front end of their purchase, the purchase price, the value, the loan situation, if they're getting a loan. But I think, again, if you think about then integrating cost segregation, well, now once it's done, you're going to most likely have a significant amount of additional cash on hand that you may not otherwise have had. And as you said, that's something that we're happy to illustrate for folks on the front end of things before they would actually close.
Right. And then that cash can be used for things like fixing up the property and adding value in other ways and then leading you to increase rent. So it's a great strategy to implement.
Exactly right.
Right.
Exactly right.
So can you talk a little bit about how well cost segregation works for short-term property holds versus long-term hold and which scenario it's better for?
Sure. I think we'll make this as an overriding general statement. We believe that if you are not planning to hold the property for at least 5 years, then chances are cost segregation is not right for you. And we can speak to why that is in this area of recapture of depreciation. But for long-term property holders, if you are planning to have and hold that property for 5 years or more, and just as you said, Kieran, if you'd like to have that cash in hand to reinvest and improve that property, or have cash on hand where you close on the first property, and now all of a sudden, if you have 100 or 200 or 300,000 or more in cash that you didn't think you were going to have, well, maybe Kieran finds you the next property, and it's an opportunity to take advantage of. So 5 years or more, without question. 5 years or less, we would not recommend it.
Got it. And how long do the tax benefits of cost segregation last?
So the way that cost seg works is that we'll study the building and we will determine how much additional depreciation or accelerated depreciation we can create. That is available to the property owner immediately to offset their income. Now, without getting too deep into the weeds here, so to speak, I would just simply say that if we create, say, $400,000 worth of additional depreciation, and if the owner only needs to utilize 100,000 of that or 200,000 of that to help offset their income, then whatever is that remaining balance, it just stays on their books and it moves forward and it carries forward so that they are then able to use it in subsequent years. So part of the power of cost seg is it's there to be used to continue to offset income based on all the other factors that one's CPA would utilize in preparing their returns. But when we get to a point of looking to offset income, that's where the power of accelerated depreciation comes in.
And how long can that additional value that's not taken right away, how many years into the future can that be pushed forward?
There is no time limit. It just continues forward until all of the accelerated depreciation is used up. So some people, large income earners, they may use it up in the first few years. Others that perhaps when all is said and done and the way they handle their tax situation, if they're reducing income and driving it down, and then they incorporate cost seg to offset whatever is left, well, they may be able to stretch it out longer. But generally speaking, we have never had a situation where this hasn't proved to be beneficial and provide folks with significant benefit.
So can you talk briefly about depreciation recapture and how that works with cost segregation?
Yes, also, it's another great and important question. And again, just at a high level, with respect to recapture. And the reason why we say to folks that you want to hold this property for at least 5 years. Anytime that someone would sell an asset, you have to pay recapture on the gain of the sale, which is the total sales price less the net book value. Now, if we increase depreciation in the short term by completing a cost seg study, they're going to have more recapture, since the net book value will be less than what you had if you had not completed a cost seg study. So this is why generally we advise against cost seg if you are going to sell that property in less than 5 years. So if anybody wants to drill into this further, I'm more than happy to speak with them offline. But it is something that needs to be reviewed to make sense and see if it's right for them.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the different factors of cost segregation. So in summary, in which situations does cost segregation work best?
So I think that to really kind of summarize in general, buildings that have building basis greater than $700,000, whether those be newly purchased properties or purchases that were made within the last 7 years. In addition to that, and very, very important, you mentioned it earlier, is that if people improve their existing properties, and if they spend out of pocket more than $300,000 in improvements on an existing property, because of the current rules, it absolutely makes good business sense to see what the impact and what the benefits could be. If you're not making money, if you're not paying tax, or if you want to overpay your taxes, then maybe cost segregation isn't right for you.
Okay. And are there any recent developments in the tax code that have further enhanced the benefits of cost segregation?
Yes, in fact, and it really was just the rules that were put into place back with the Jobs and Tax Reform Act of 2017, along with recent additions to the CARES Act that were put in place just last year. Mm-hmm. They truly added rocket fuel, is the way I describe it. They added rocket fuel to the benefits that are available to owners, and here's how. As I said earlier, when we go in and we study a building, we look at the 5-year components here, we look at the 15-year components here, a little longer. And prior to tax reform and prior to the CARES Act, the owner would receive the 5-year benefit over the first 5 years, the 15-year benefit over the first 15 years. Still quite a bit better than 27 and a half years. Enter these two recent acts. And what happens now is, for those that have a study done and they properly document and can support the moving of these building elements to shorter life periods, what we're able to do is we're able to take all of it, all of the 5-year property, all of the 15-year property, and we just pull it all together, and it's immediately available to the property owner in year 1. Wow. And it just makes the numbers very, very large, and it's been very, very impactful for property owners.
That's amazing, because now these owners have quite a bit of money, again, to either reinvest into the property or to purchase more property and kind of continue to build their portfolio.
Yes, even, and we'll speak to it, even what's generally considered a smaller property, there's the opportunity for there to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in accelerated depreciation. And if it's a larger building, it literally is millions of dollars in accelerated depreciation. So again, for those that can get kind of their arms around the idea that here I can implement this to keep more cash on hand now rather than giving it to Uncle Sam, those are the people that say, hey, I really do want to learn more about this.
So there's been a lot of talk with the Biden administration and the 1031 exchange being changed or going away. If something like that were to happen, could cost segregation be an alternative strategy for reducing taxes?
Yes, and in fact, I would say absolutely yes. And here's why. First off, my partner, Kurt, he is the chairman of the Technical Standards Committee of the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals. Kurt himself is a CPA, so we're following this very closely. As of today, as far as we know, there are going to be no changes to the rules surrounding cost segregation. President Biden is proposing to not allow 1031 exchanges for anything over $500,000 worth of gain.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that that bodes very well for us, because if somebody is going to sell an old property, exchange into a new one, and if they have $500,000 of gain on that sale, and if we go in and we then do a cost seg study on that new property, there's a very good chance that we will create enough accelerated depreciation that it might in fact completely wipe out the tax that they would have to pay on that gain. So we are, I think, in a position where this is maybe an absolute strategy that can benefit owners if in fact this goes through.
That's amazing. So I guess we will wait and see what happens with that. But that's at least that's some kind of light, because I know it's a lot of investors are very concerned about the 1031 exchange going away. So this is a good potential alternative for that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So can you share a recent success story that you've had with cost segregation, just to kind of illustrate how this works in real life?
Yes, I will. And maybe before I share what is a real life example, I would share, Kieran, that we are very focused on front end due diligence. We do that at no cost. There is no obligation, because we want to be absolutely certain that if we suggest that people look to engage us, we know in advance that we are going to deliver benefit that absolutely makes sense and pencil. If for whatever reason it would not, we are going to tell folks, we just don't think this is a proper fit. So the owners will know and we will know what we can anticipate. So a recent, and I went through just recent projects that we did to try to kind of really hone in on what might be applicable for your audience, so to speak. And actually, if anybody is interested, just to get an idea of the type of building, I went online and I saw there was enough information, enough visuals, enough pictures for people to see. And this was a multifamily unit. It was located at 929 South Townsend Street in Santa Ana. And if you Google that, you'll see the property. People will know and be able to relate to it, I think, because of both the interior and the exterior elements. Now, the owner of that building, we were able to study that property. And I probably, because within the provisor's world, I should also note that Griselda DeMille, who was the banker here, suggested this to their client. And it was because of her recommendation that they went down the path, because this was something that was new. And as a result of us performing this study, when we finished our work, we accelerated $425,000 of depreciation that they were able to utilize in year one. So think of it this way. If they are in a 50% tax bracket, that means that we were able to save them $213,000 in tax. If
Wow.
they were in a 40% tax bracket, it would be 10% less, roughly 190,000, 30%, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line, I guess, is that it was just a very, very powerful result for the owner, who turned out he was a terrific guy, and we were pleased to have the opportunity to work with them.
That's amazing. So, how long does it take for this whole process from the time when somebody reaches out to you, says they're interested in it, and then to complete the study and to implement everything that needs to be done?
It's a great question. So generally speaking, what we'll do is we'll get just some general information on the property. Property address, the month and year that they purchased the property. If they have an appraisal, that's always a great source of information for us to be able to drill in and get a sense of things there. We'll put together our benchmark overview and our illustration, typically within no more than a week's time, typically less. And if somebody decides that they'd like to proceed and move forward, then generally speaking, it takes us between 4 and 6 weeks to do all the needed work to present to the client a certified and stamped cost seg study, which includes our full breakdown and essentially rebuilding the building piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
We also, regardless of where it is in the country, we physically travel and we do a site inspection. We have a site survey team that's dedicated, that does these inspections so that we're able to gather a tremendous amount of digital data. And then we put together these reports and we deliver them to the client. So the other question too, because I'm sure it's in people's minds, well, what does this cost to do? And I would say this, that generally speaking, smaller properties that we're going to take a look at, they're going to be somewhere in the $6,000 to $7,000 range to do the work. And up at the higher end for properties that are extremely large, typically, usually no more than $25,000. And that would be for an extremely large property. We did not too long ago a manufacturing facility in Rancho Cucamonga. It was over 180,000 square feet. Something like that was on the higher end. We've done some very large apartment buildings in the San Fernando Valley, hundreds of units, similar situation. But that's generally the range, and it kind of falls in between, and it's based on the size and the complexity of the building, the amount of information that the clients have. And again, we're very upfront and transparent about how we're going to go about our process and what costs are going to be entailed. And our fees are both all-inclusive. There's no after-the-fact surprises. The other important thing is that it's a tax-deductible expense. So everybody always likes that as well.
There you go. That's fantastic. So for listeners who are interested in getting in touch with you, either to learn more about some of the topics that we've touched on today, or maybe to have you do an evaluation, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, certainly we are, in this world that we live in of emails and texts and all that. If people want to pick up the phone, I'm happy to talk to folks. And my phone number is 805 680-3834. Also, our website is www.costseg-pros.com, or you can email me at joel@costseginitiatives.com. I'm happy to answer questions. And of course, anyone that's affiliated with you there, my time is theirs.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you so much for sharing all this information. I know when I first learned about cost segregation, it was kind of like a world of opportunity opened up. So I hope that a lot of the listeners are able to digest this information and, gain something from it. I'm sure they will. So thanks again so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Karen, it is my pleasure. And as our friend and colleague, Gary Bregman, has said, You are a rising star, and that you surely are. So thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Okie doke.